3 spine-chilling true horror tales discovered at summer's end, sinister secrets revealed. Mark's heart raced as he stepped into his house, shaking off the chill of the autumn air. Early evenings brought darkness too soon, feeding fears that crept into Maplewood like fog. The news had been grim: children vanished without so much as a whisper. It was a nightmare unfolding right in the heart of his quiet neighborhood. That familiar feeling of safety, once woven into the very essence of suburbia, felt like a taunt now. As an EMT, he had seen the grisly consequences of life, the same kind of mundane horror that can ooze from the corner of a sweet suburb. After a grueling shift, Mark's tired eyes landed on a tattered family photo that had slipped from Sarah's backpack. In it were the Thompsons, their faces frozen in eerie smiles, outside their picture-perfect home. As he stared, a chill invaded him, uninvited, whispering secrets he wasn't ready to hear. He remembered the murmurs that swirled about them, how the Thompsons' laughter seemed just a bit too loud, just a touch too long. Shadows flickered on their perfectly manicured lawn. The creeping chill of autumn breathed life into the whispers around him, neighbors eyeing each other furtively, exchanging tales that felt more like horror stories. He started to notice the Thompsons' lights flickering at odd hours, their basement door rattling like a restless spirit. Why hadn't he noticed before? It was subtle at first, a gnawing instinct tugging at his gut that something there was not right. He knew they were odd people, but were they capable of something sinister? Amidst all this, Sarah played gleefully with the Thompsons' kids next door. It's just a play date, he told himself, forcing calm into his racing heart. But something dark lingered beneath his skin, like a shadow refusing to leave. He wanted to ignore it, to cling to the sunny facade of Maplewood, but it was difficult to ignore the panic that slowly seeped into the community. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Then the earth shifted beneath him. Sarah disappeared during a playdate, just like that. An innocent afternoon turned into a living nightmare. Panic clawed at Mark as he bolted through the Thompsons' immaculate door. Each heartbeat echoed in his ears and the world narrowed to a single thought: finding his daughter. The whispers escalated to a roar in his mind. What if, down the hallway, the basement door loomed ominously? It rattled again, a heartbeat of dread pulsing through it. He could feel it, the weight of family secrets tethered to a curse woven into the very air. He flung open the door, its creaking protest echoing his growing despair. What lay beneath? Would he find Sarah hugging a toy, laughing, or would he stumble upon something unimaginable lurking in the shadows? With each breath, Mark felt the grip of urgency and fear entwine around him, pulling him deeper. It was a descent into darkness. Answers awaited. But would it be light he found, or something far worse? The basement stairs descended into murky darkness, each step creaking in protest under Mark's weight. The chilly air stung his lungs, thick with the scent of damp earth, and something else, something metallic. Panic washed over him, choking off reason. "Sarah!" he called, his voice reverberating unnervingly back at him. Silence hung heavy. The lack of response clawed at his heart, twisting it tighter. He flicked on his phone's flashlight, the weak beam illuminating the walls, revealing peeling paint and cobwebs that clung like forgotten memories. The air was stale, as if it had been holding its breath for far too long. Eye in the back of the basement, a flicker caught his eye. Something flickered, fluorescent but erratic, like a heart fighting for its last beat. He moved towards it, each step a war between dread and determination. The cold stone beneath his feet felt less like a foundation and more like a tomb holding its secrets tight. Mark's breath quickened. Was that a child's laugh? It echoed faintly, weaving through the damp air. "Sarah!" he shouted again, desperate, pushing through the fear that clawed at his throat. The laughter trailed off, replaced by an unsettling stillness that resonated like a warning bell. His flashlight landed on a door at the far end of the room, unremarkable but for the way shadows latched onto it, as if trying to pull it into the abyss. It was slightly ajar. My heart pounded, urging him to run, to flee, but his instincts demanded he advance. He edged closer to the door, his heart thudding violently against his ribs. The laughter had returned, soft and innocent, tinged with something he couldn't quite place. It sent chills rippling down his spine. With a trembling hand, he pushed the door wide open. What he saw inside almost shattered him. The walls were plastered with children's drawings, brightly colored pictures of families, sunshine, and smiling faces. But the joy in them felt all wrong, distorted like images seen through murky water. At the center stood a table adorned with an alarming collection of toys. Teddy bears, dolls with vacant eyes, and old action figures gathered dust, yet they emanated an uneasy aura, as if they were witnesses to something unspeakable. And there, in the far corner, was Sarah. She sat on the floor, drawing intently on a sheet of paper. Her intense focus contrasted harshly with the darkness surrounding her, and a wave of relief surged through Mark momentarily. But as he stepped into the room, her head snapped up, her face pale, eyes wide, but devoid of recognition. "Daddy?" she whispered, a vacant tone in her voice that made his blood run cold. Something was wrong. "See the fun I'm having?" Mark's heart plummeted. The innocence of the moment was overshadowed by an instinctual dread, a suffocating fear that clawed deeper. He rushed forward, knelt beside her, and pulled her into a fierce embrace, the warmth of her small body grounding him amid the chaos. As he held her tightly, the darkness seemed to close in, shadows stretching and contracting unnaturally as if drawn to them. "We need to go, now," he urged, but her small hand reached up, hesitating. "Not yet, Daddy, they want to play." The flickering light died abruptly, merging them into blackness. Silence swallowed them whole, isolating them from the outside world. A low humming began to vibrate through the air, filling the void with a deep, unsettling pulse. He could feel it in the marrow of his bones, a sinister rhythm, reminding him that they were not alone. In the suffocating darkness, Mark's eyes darted around wildly, a whisper creeping into his thoughts. What had they stumbled into? And who were they? The basement door slammed shut behind them, and in that moment of closing dread, he began to understand. In Maplewood, nothing was ever as it seemed. "Daddy," Sarah said softly, her voice dripping with innocence, yet it sent shivers racing down his spine. "Can we stay and play just a little longer?" A primal instinct surged within him. This was just the beginning of a nightmare unspooling. And deep within, he sensed that beyond the door they would never again find safety, only the cold hands of forgotten shadows waiting to welcome them home. Darkness enveloped them like a damp shroud, the silence thick enough to suffocate. A pulse throbbed in Mark's ears, a steady hum that seemed to vibrate through the very walls. He tightened his grip around Sarah, his heart racing, each beat a drum echoing the urgency of their escape. "Sarah, we have to get out of here," he whispered, begging for her to understand. But her eyes, those wide, innocent eyes, were set on something beyond him, lost in a different world. "Daddy, don't you hear it?" Her voice was a low murmur, almost dreamy. "They're calling us. It's fun." A cold tremor danced down his spine, and he instinctively turned, scanning the room for any movement. The toys seemed to shift subtly, shadows fleeting across their surfaces as if they were alive. The air thickened with an oppressive weight, and Mark felt the hair on his arms stand on end. Suddenly, the floor creaked, punctuating the silence. Mark turned back to Sarah, who was pointing at the wall. "Look, Daddy! They want us to join." He followed her gaze, and his blood ran cold as he saw the drawings come to life in his mind. Each image now felt like a warning, an invitation drenched in malice. The families in the drawings grinned too wide, their smiles twisted and desperate, as if they'd once lived and now were trapped, begging for release. The humming intensified, resonating deeper inside him, as if it were a lullaby meant to beckon trusting souls. "No, Sarah, we can't," he said, his voice rising. "We need to." The floorboards groaned, louder this time, like a creature awakening from a long slumber. Shadows seeped from the corners of the room, swirling and elongating, distorting into grotesque shapes that writhed hungrily. Panic surged through him. Mark felt a gravity pulling him towards the wall, and its ghastly artwork, as if something unseen was reaching out. "Stay close," he shouted, yanking Sarah against him. "We're leaving." But she didn't budge, her gaze still transfixed on the wall. The darkness pulsated, wrapping around them like a predator stalking its prey. He could feel the cold tendrils of fear inching closer, an unsettling whisper weaving through the air, promising joy and terror in equal measure. "Please, just a minute longer," Sarah pleaded, her small voice breaking through the chaos. "I want to play Sarah." The desperation in his voice broke, and he shook her gently. "Listen to me. We have to go. Now." In that moment, the flickering light returned. For a heartbeat, the room illuminated brilliantly, purging shadows momentarily. And there, in stark relief, he saw the other drawings, the faces of children who had played too long, their eyes wide, mouths sewn shut. Fear clawed at his throat. In terror, Mark turned to bolt back through the doorway. But it slammed open before him, a figure emerging from the shadows, its features indistinguishable and ethereal. Mark stumbled back, heart racing. Sarah remained glued to the floor, watching, enchanted, as if the figure held every answer she sought. "Sarah, no!" Mark's voice cracked, and he lunged forward, but the shadows clawed at him, shackling him in place. "Welcome home," the figure hissed, a voice like rusted chains dragging upon stone. The darkness rippled, and he felt it, the weight of despair and longing that clawed at his soul. Mark's heart fluttered with the realization. They weren't alone, and perhaps neither were the lost souls reflected in those drawings. "Daddy," Sarah smiled serenely, "can we stay forever?" The shadows closed in tighter, coiling around him as the pulse of the basement grew louder, drowning out every thought but one. They had crossed the threshold, and now the game was about to begin. As he fought against the encroaching darkness, a singular thought consumed him. What if there was no escape, and the figures were right? Maybe this place was truly their home. Just as everything began to blur, he felt a stabbing pull, the kind that ruptured the very fabric of reality. And then, a whisper slid through the chaos, barely audible yet commanding. "It's time to play." What in the world awaited them on the other side of that threshold? The darkness folded in around them like a living thing, and Mark felt stifled, as if the very air were charged with dread. He strained to break free from the shadow's grip, but the weight of despair tightened like a vice. "Sarah!" he shouted, wrenching himself away from the figure that glimmered before him. It felt like an eternity, but the instant stretched, taut and filled with unending sorrow. Sarah stood as if hypnotized, her eyes locked in a trance upon the figure, who blinked in a mock semblance of kindness, its mouth curling into a grotesque smile. "Come play," the figure cooed, its voice a chilling lullaby that crept under Mark's skin. He fought the urge to parallel Sarah's gaze, fearing the abyss that hung in the stillness beyond. "We have to get out of here," he cried, his voice raw and hoarse. Yet Sarah merely giggled, the sound devoid of the innocence it once held. "But Daddy, it's so much fun," she replied, and Mark saw her expression shift, caught between delight and shadow. It shattered his heart to witness her sweet spirit chained to this creeping evil. Mark's pulse thundered in his ears, pushing him toward decision. He felt himself fraying at the edges, his mind a chaotic storm buzzing with fear. With a desperate lunge, he snatched Sarah by the shoulders, drawing her back, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he saw clarity return to her eyes. "Sarah, focus! We have to leave. Please!" he urged, shaking her slightly. The moment drew out painfully, the shadows still writhing. Her expression shifted, confusion washing over her face. "Daddy?" "Yes," he shouted, relief blooming within him. But the moment was shattered as the darkness around them throbbed, and the figure's voice slithered back into their senses. "You can't leave. You belong to us now." Forever. A chill consumed him. Mark's instincts screamed for him to act, to flee even if it led to the unknown. Ignoring the pain of his heart, he tore backwards, pulling Sarah with him. He felt something cold wrap around his ankle, anchoring him to the spot. Desperation clawed at his throat as he fought against the tightening grip. "Run!" he shouted. Not even a moment later, the figure lunged forward as if propelled by malice, its form distorting, growing larger and indistinguishable, a nightmare unleashed. It reached out, fingers elongated into claws. Mark braced himself, shielding Sarah, knowing they needed to break the hold of whatever was looming just beyond the veil. Now! With pure instinct driving him, he pushed against the overwhelming tide of shadow. The floor cracked beneath him, the house groaning as if resisting their exit. Suddenly, the walls shuddered, and a compartment opened up, an escape that blinked like a fleeting salvation. This shimmering edge of light beckoned from the depths of the shadows. "Sarah!" His voice echoed, a raw plea drowning in the cacophony of whispers that spiraled up from the walls. "The light! We have to move!" And in that terrifying dance, he saw it, the smiling faces from the drawings shifting into anguished expressions, mouthless cries splattering against the walls around them. They were children trapped, forever begging for release. "Daddy, I'm scared!" Sarah cried, finally pulled from her reverie. "Hold on tight!" he shouted while lunging toward the light, every ounce of his strength focused on that tiny flicker. They tumbled through just as the darkness lunged, claws lashing out, barely missing them. Mark felt a final sting of the shadow dragging at him, a desperate grasping for a soul that could not be held. As they landed in a disheveled heap, the weight of the shadows lifted, dissipating into the air. They gasped for breath, panting in the pale light, a world that seemed so far removed from the terror they'd just escaped. But as Mark turned to catch his breath, a chill swept through him. Just behind them, the basement door creaked slightly ajar, whispering promises of what they thought they had left behind. "Did we make it, Daddy?" Sarah whispered, eyes wide and glistening. And as Mark looked at Sarah, the atmosphere thickened again, and the shadows stirred just beyond the threshold. A new dread blossomed, but inside him lay another fear, unspoken. "Is it really over?" The door loomed, creaking once more, as a familiar voice wove through the darkness, soft yet menacing. "This is not the end, it's only the beginning." What awaited them behind that door? Mark's chest heaved as he rose to his feet, instinctively shielding Sarah from the door. The pale light that had offered them refuge now seemed fragile, flickering like a candle on the verge of extinguishing. His heart raced, every beat echoing a new frenzied fear. Had they only traded one nightmare for another? "Stay close to me," he whispered, though the words felt hollow against the chill that seeped in through the open door. Sarah nodded, her small hand clutching his tight. Her grip was warm, alive. A small comfort in an otherwise haunting world. The whispers grew louder, curling around them like smoke. Each syllable dripped with malign intent. They felt as if they were pulling at the strings of reality itself. A creeping sensation slithered up Mark's spine. He peered cautiously over his shoulder, dread pooling in his gut as he caught sight of the darkened corridor behind them. "Daddy, what is happening?" Sarah's voice trembled. "We just need to go, we can't look back." But he felt the pull of the abyss behind him, like a siren's song inviting him to cross over, to surrender to whatever lay beyond the door. And just like that, temptation gripped him. He took a step toward the threshold, drawn into the mesmerizing blackness. Shadows writhed and twisted as they beckoned him, whispering promises of salvation and escape. Mark they dripped with familiarity, each syllable slicing through the fear like a knife. "Join us," he shook his head, the sharp denial like a fresh wound, but the urge grew. Images flashed in his mind, laughter, joyous moments with Sarah, and yet the children. Those hollow eyes, the anguished mouths. The realization crashed over him like a wave. They were still trapped, waiting, and their pain was now intertwined with his own. "Sarah," he whispered urgently, pulling her back, "we can't be here. We have to leave." As if sensing the shift in his resolve, the voice morphed, twisting into something far more sinister, deeper than the depths of darkness. "Do you really think running will save her? You'll never escape, they will always find you." "Who?" Mark demanded, panic surging again. A laugh echoed low and inviting. It reverberated through his bones, laced with echoes of 1,000 lost souls. Mark's breath quickened. His mind raced as he analyzed every option. He glanced back at the door. It was still ajar, inviting, and wrought with danger. The tainted glow of the shadows pulsated ominously. Then he remembered something, an old wives' tale told around campfires. What if they're feeding off our fear? Daddy? What are you talking about? Sarah pressed, eyes wide, fear creeping back across her face. Maybe if we face them, if we show them we're not afraid. Mark's voice wavered, but determination filled the cracks. Could it work? Could they overpower such a darkness? Let us try, he announced, though doubt lingered, heavy like a storm cloud. With that, he turned to the door, stepping forward with resolve. You have no power over us, he shouted, casting his voice into the void. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. The darkened space seemed to recoil, the shadows around them shuddering. Mark's heart raced. Had he truly thrown the challenge? Were they finally gaining control? But then, the laughter, eerily jubilant, returned, heightened and sinister. Oh, but we are not alone. A rush of cold air swept through the corridor, snaking around him, and he felt a weight pressing down on his chest. The shadows shrieked and flared, and for a moment, they were lit up by a million shimmering eyes, each glistening with hunger. Run, Sarah! He bellowed, shoving her ahead, adrenaline sharpening his senses. They sprinted away from the door, the grip of darkness hot on their heels. But the laughter rang louder, echoing in haunting layers as it merged together into one sinister cry, "You'll never escape your fate!" Mark and Sarah dashed deeper into the thin glow of the alluring light, fear propelling them forward. The walls squeezed in around them, squeezing the air from their lungs as they raced towards the unknown. What was lurking ahead? Was there truly an escape waiting for them, or only deeper shadows and darker truths? Mark felt the dark pull of the past tugging at him again, the signs of despair wrapping tightly around him as they plunged forward. Would they find a way out, or would the shadows swallow them whole? Mark and Sarah ran like the wind, feet pounding on cold concrete. The claustrophobic corridor twisted and turned, a maze of torment that seemed to go on forever. Behind them, the shadows roared to life, hungry and relentless. Mark's heart rattled in his chest, desperation fueling each stride as they weaved past flickering lights that barely held the darkness at bay. "Daddy, I can't breathe," Sarah gasped, panting heavily. "Just a little further, sweetheart. We'll find somewhere safe." The lie stung his throat. He could feel the fear rising like bile. The shadows pulsated, stretching and contorting as if they were aware of their every movement, and they hungered for them. Suddenly, the walls shook, resonating with a hollow thrum. The sound was an echo of whispers, growing. Each syllable morphed into a sinister chant, circling them like a predator stalking its prey. "Fear, fear, fear," they sang, growing louder, insistent. Mark wanted to scream, but he forced the sound down. "Daddy!" Sarah yelled. Panic twisted her features. "Don't look back. Keep running," he urged, but the air turned thick, almost viscous. It clawed at his throat and slowed him. They rounded a corner. There, a door at the end. A single flicker of golden light spilled out from beneath it. Hope surged in Mark's chest, igniting his limbs. There! That'll be our way out. He tightened his grip on Sarah's hand, bolting toward the door as if it were salvation itself. But just as they reached it, a cold wave erupted from behind. Mark felt it wash over him, solid and unyielding. A jolt of frozen dread paralyzed him. He glanced back, and in that fleeting moment, the shadows quivered, consolidating into a mass of malice. Eyes, more than he could count, glared back at them. Hollow and soulless, they blurred the line between nightmarish fiction and dreadful reality. "Let us go!" he cried, slamming against the door. It swung open with a creak inviting yet ominous. "What's in there, Daddy?" Sarah's voice quivered, a whisper caught between fear and hope. "Something better than this." He pulled her inside and slammed the door shut, locking it tight. They stood in the darkened room, heartbeats hammering in sync. The light flickered weakly, and the walls felt alive, breathing around them. Mark glanced around quickly, a small, cramped space cluttered with crates and dust. But it felt sacred, almost like a sanctuary. "Have we lost them?" Sarah asked, trembling as she pressed against him. Mark was about to reassure her when a sharp scraping sound pierced the air. It came from outside, nails on wood, scratching relentlessly. No, no, they're still here, Mark hissed, gripping Sarah tighter. The door began to shudder, a heavy thump reverberating through the wood that made the ground shake beneath him. The whispers returned, now a cacophony, a horrible harmony of laughter and cries. You think you can hide? You are ours forever, he tensed, bracing himself against the door, urgency flooding his veins. We have to find a way out. The room had a single window, shrouded in darkness. Mark rushed toward it, yanking at the metal latch. It opened with a snap, and an icy night breeze howled through, pulling at him with a sinister call. Daddy, please! Sarah's voice called, fear drenching her words. Mark glanced back at her, the desperation cracking through his resolve. We have to jump. It's our only chance. But what if no time? He cut her off. Outside, the creeping shadow loomed closer, fingers of darkness reaching for them through the cracks. Taking a deep breath, Mark grabbed Sarah's small hand once more. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. They leapt into the night, the air whipping around them like knives. But as they fell, a new shriek rang out, echoing through the void as the shadows surged in relentless pursuit. What lay below? Was it freedom or more darkness? As they collided with the ground and the world spun away, the shadows hissed. Mark felt the edges of consciousness fading as the lingering call of the lost children whispered, "Welcome home." The impact jarred Mark straight back into a whirlwind of pain and confusion. His heart raced as he blinked against the blackness, remnants of a fading scream still echoing in his ears. He pushed himself onto his feet, adrenaline casting aside the pain shooting through his legs. Head spinning, he reached for Sarah, his heart clenching when he couldn't find her. Sarah! Panic clawed at his throat. Where are you? A faint whimper broke through the darkness, and Mark's chest tightened. Daddy, I'm here. Her voice was small, trembling. He lunged toward it, hands outstretched, feeling for her in the murky expanse. The air felt different down here, thicker, cloaked in shadows that seemed to pulse and breathe. He finally clasped her arm and pulled her close, relief surging through him. But the moment was short-lived. The echoes of their fall dampened, replaced by a low, chilling hum that vibrated through the ground. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay silent. The sound grew in unsettling, inhuman chant threading through the shadows around them. Lost, 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 it echoed, each syllable drawing nearer. Daddy, I'm scared, Sarah whispered, clutching his shirt. Should we need to move? Mark urged, peering into the cavernous darkness. Straining, he discerned vague outlines. The walls seemed to curve into a recess, a dark archway shimmering in the faintest glint of light. Mark tightened his grip on Sarah's hand, and together they crept toward it. With each step, the coldness clawed deeper into their bones. What if it's a trap? Sarah murmured, her eyes wide. Mark didn't reply. He couldn't. What lay behind that archway? Freedom or more nightmares? The whispers persisted, each one like a noose, tightening and suffocating. The shadows hovered, gliding just out of sight, their presence palpable and grotesque. They reached the archway, and Mark felt the hairs on his neck stand on end. A pulse of darkness buzzed in the air, like the hum of machinery left unattended. He hesitated, heart hammering against his ribs, battling against the instinct to flee. Suddenly, a sharp sound slashed through the air, the sound of dozens of feet skittering over the ground behind them. Mark spun, adrenaline surging as the shadows lunged. They were fast, swarming like a dark tide, gliding effortlessly over the rubble. We have to go, he shouted, adrenaline forcing the words out as he yanked Sarah through the archway. They stumbled forward, barreling into another corridor, this one shrouded in fog. But instead of the oppressive darkness, flickering lights illuminated their path. Is this a way out? Sarah panted, eyes wide in awe. I don't know, Mark answered, the words stinging his throat. They pressed ahead, the flickering light full of promise, but dread gnawed at the edges of his mind. Suddenly, the lights flickered out, plunging them into darkness again. Fear snaked through him. He could hear them, the whispers were back, now bitter and mocking. You can't escape, you belong to us, Daddy. Sarah shrieked as the shadows surged forward, merging into a vortex of despair. Mark turned, his heart pounding as he faced the threatening wall of despair. "Run, Sarah!" he screamed, pushing her ahead. The cold fingers of darkness grazed his arm, squeezing tighter. They darted down the corridor, the sound of their frantic footfalls lost against the cacophony of laughter echoing in their ears. Light returned, but it flickered like a dying star. They paused, breathless, fear escalating as the atmosphere thickened again. "Where are we now?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Mark could answer, a door burst open at the other end of the corridor. Figures emerged from the shadows, their faces twisted with familiar smiles. Children, but changed bodies hollow, eyes black voids. Mark felt the agony of realization. No, not them. The children advanced, their grins widening in a twisted mockery. They united, a swarm of lost souls. "What do you want?" Mark shouted, backing up against the wall, frantically looking for an escape. The lead child stepped forward, laughter bubbling up. Like a sinister song. "To play with you forever." A fresh dread washed over Mark. Did he truly leave one nightmare only to walk into another? "Run!" he yelled, gripping Sarah's arm once more. But as they spun to flee, another echo screamed through the air. The shadowy figures converged behind them, blocking all chances of escape. Darkness advanced, hungry and relentless. And Mark understood no matter where they ran, they could never truly escape. What awaited them in the dark corner of their new prison? Would they survive this relentless realm of lost souls, or join them in eternal despair? Mark's heart raced as he pressed his back against the cold, damp wall. The laughter of the twisted children echoed in his ears, a mocking serenade that sent shivers down his spine. He could feel Sarah's tiny, trembling form next to him, her breath quickening in sync with his own panic. "Do you think they will actually hurt us?" she whispered, eyes wide and glossy. "I don't know," he stammered, adrenaline tightening his throat. He peered through the flickering light trying to find an exit, but the swarm of children moved like shadows, impossibly fast and relentless. "What if we just stand still? Maybe they won't see us," Sarah suggested, though her voice held no conviction. "No! We can't!" Mark spat out, sending his trembling hand through his hair in frustration. He scanned the hallway, feeling a surge of desperation. "We have to keep moving. There has to be a way out of here." The lead child, with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes, stepped closer, tilting its head in a mocking fashion. "Why would you want to leave?" "We're just playing." Mark clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe. "We're not playing. We want to go home." But deep down, he felt the ground of hope slipping beneath him. As if sensing his fear, the children began to chant again, their voices weaving together into a horrifying symphony. "Home is lost, you belong with us, Daddy. I don't like this," Sarah cried, grabbing onto his shirt tighter. The darkened arches behind them seemed to stretch, shifting in a grotesque dance. The shadows pulsed, drawing near, hungrily awaiting their next move. Mark shook his head, trying to clear the fog of panic through sheer will. "Hold on to me," he shouted. He yanked Sarah back, their hearts pounding in a chaotic rhythm as they broke into a sprint down the corridor. Shadows clawed at their ankles, whispering temptations, but Mark pushed onward, fear fueling his escape. The corridor twisted and turned, and each bend faded into an endless tunnel of darkness. Mark's breath came in ragged gasps. "Stay close. No matter what you see or hear, don't let go." Behind them, the demonic children giggled, their laughter echoing louder, filling every crevice and hollow space. The sound clung to him, making every hair on his body stand on end. Then, without warning, the flickering lights flared back to life, revealing a room that appeared monstrous and unreal. The walls were lined with haunting paintings of joyful children, their faces eerily familiar, each framed in models of a distorted smile. It was suffocatingly bright in contrast to the darkness they had just escaped, yet the air felt wrong, heavy with a sinister undertone. Mark paused, confusion gripping him. "What is this place?" "Look!" Sarah pointed. A door stood ajar at the far end of the room, light spilling from it as if to beckon them. "Come on!" Mark moved toward it, hope igniting momentarily within him. They dashed across the room, but just as they reached the door, it slammed shut with an earth-shattering boom. The sound resonated within him, a grim reminder of their entrapment. In the distance, he heard it, the lullaby of lost children, beckoning them back with deceitful sweetness. "Come back to us," panic stitched Mark's chest as he twisted around, frantically looking for another way out. The walls began to close in, the paintings staring down at him with expectant eyes. "Please! Don't!" Sarah shrieked, her small voice fracturing under the weight of dread. Mark's heart sank. Where were they? What twisted fate awaited them here? Behind him, the laughter grew louder, a terrifying symphony accompanied by the creeping shadows that snaked from the walls, curling around his legs. No! He felt the grip of despair weighing heavy as he faced the darkness smothering them. Did he have enough fight left to protect Sarah? Or was this the end? "Mark!" Sarah cried out, pointing behind him. He turned, dread icing his veins. Shadows surged towards them, hungry and mindless. Mark took a deep breath, and in that moment of tethered strength, he knew they had to push forward or be swallowed whole. "Hold on tight!" he yelled, yanking her close as he barreled toward the oppressive darkness ahead. Would they break free or be consumed by the chaos that lurked beyond? As they plunged deeper into the shadows, Mark whispered barely above a breath, "Whatever happens, don't let go." The darkness thickened, and just before it engulfed them, a single voice cut through the chaos, a voice he couldn't recognize, but one that chilled him to the core, promising dread and despair. Welcome home. Would they find a way back to themselves, or would they be lost forever in this new horror? Mark threw himself against the wall of darkness, clutching Sarah to his chest. The oppressive atmosphere weighed down on them like a fog. It felt alive, pulsating with energy, each heartbeat echoing through the silence, each breath a shallow gasp filled with dread. "Don't look back," he hissed, feeling a surge of terror as the shadows crept closer, eager to reclaim what had tried to escape. He pushed forward, the passage narrowing with every step they took. A cold sweat trickled down his back, the contrast between the darkness that pursued them and the frantic beat of his heart vivid and relentless. The darkness smelled of damp earth and decay. He stumbled but caught himself, dragging Sarah along as they plunged deeper into the unknown. "Where is this taking us?" he muttered, almost to himself, every instinct screaming for him to turn and run, to flee from the laughter that echoed, now distant but growing closer. The walls, once merely shadowy, began to shift. Mark glanced sideways and caught fleeting glimpses of faces embedded within the stone, twisted, blood-curdling screams plastered eternally in anguished silhouettes. They watched, their eyes full of sorrow and longing. It sent a chill through him deeper than any fear. He looked ahead, refusing to dwell on the murals of lost souls. "Mark!" Sarah's voice trembled, pulling him back to the present. "What if we don't find Daddy? What if He pressed his fingers to her lips. That nagging feeling of dread clawed at his insides. "We will find him. I promise." Her wide eyes searched his face for assurance. But as they scuttled onward, the air thickened, wrapping them in a foreboding embrace. The walls began to pulse in time with the laughter behind them, a sickeningly sweet symphony that struck fear so deep within him, he nearly faltered. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing scream shattered the stillness. It sliced through the laughter like a blade, sending the children into a frenzy. Mark froze. The laughter subsided, replaced by something worse. Whispers flitted through the air, weaving a spell that churned in his gut. "Join us, stay with us," they cooed, voices blended in harmony and malice. Shadows elongated, morphing into grotesque forms that twisted and squirmed. His pulse quickened as he recognized the voices, all the previous children he saw, each echo blending into a chorus of despair. "Get away!" he shouted into the gloom, shoving Sarah behind him. A movement caught his eye, a flicker of movement like a candle flame off to the side, where the wall undulated, brightening as if illuminated from within. "Mark! Look!" Sarah tugged on his shirt, pointing toward it. He squinted into the dark, heart hammering. "Is it a way out?" Maybe her voice held that glimmer of hope, but he could feel the cold creeping back into his bones, the predatory shadows still twitching behind them. With a second of hesitation, he made the choice. This way! He sprinted toward that flickering light, dragging Sarah behind him, desperate to escape the whispers that grew more frantic behind them. They burst through the wavering veil of shadows into a vast, brightly lit ballroom, the radiance almost blinding. Mark's eyes adjusted to the scene before them, but the comfort of light quickly faded as he took in their surroundings. The room was filled with children, too many children sitting in a circle, their faces pale and void of expression. They swayed back and forth, chanting in unison, "Forever, forever with us." Their voices dripped with a hint of glee, mingling with an undercurrent of sorrow. Mark felt his legs grow weak as he took a step back. "What is this?" His voice cracked, fear clawing at him again. As if sensing his panic, the circle turned in unison, eyes locking onto him and Sarah, their expressions sinisterly sweet. Mark's blood ran cold. Then, one voice rose above the others, a sing-song tone that struck him like ice. "You've joined us now, dear ones. You can never leave." The laughter returned, louder and more frenzied, drowning out his thoughts. Mark's mind raced. Would they ever find their way back? Or had they already crossed into a world that would consume them whole? He clutched Sarah to him, knowing the shadows weren't far behind. In this new horror, survival felt like an echo of a distant dream. What was waiting for them next? And what had they truly become? Mark's heart drummed like a war cry against his ribcage, the sounds around him swirling into a cacophony of dread. The children in the circle began to chant even louder, entranced by a primal call that promised forever, a concept that twisted in Mark's gut. They swayed hypnotically, their faces painted with a bliss that felt wrong all too soon. "Sarah, listen to me. We have to get away from here," he rasped urgently, squeezing her hand so tightly that it turned pale. "Stay right next to me." He scanned the ballroom, noting every corner, looking for a way out. The whispers were now screams in his mind, growing louder as the children's eyes flickered with malevolence. "You will stay forever," they sang, their voices melding into something more monstrous, echoing across the walls like a call to damnation. "No!" Mark refused to surrender. Couldn't he let this place take Sarah? Couldn't he let her smile become another memory laced with sorrow? With every ounce of strength he had left, he dashed past the circle, pulling Sarah along with him, ignoring the reflex to look back. A wall of shadows loomed, pulsating with hostility, but the flickering light became his compass, guiding him forward. He could hear the chilling laughter crescendo behind them, a symphony of madness. "Daddy, I'm scared." Sarah's voice trembled, her small frame shaking against his side. "I know, baby. I promise, we'll find a way out." The resolve in his heart flared brightly against the cold despair suffocating him. They ran, moving deeper into the hall until a glowing exit appeared before them. With urgency, Mark pushed through the open door, their world shifting from oppressive darkness to a weightless light that bathed them in warmth. It momentarily dulled the aching fear that clawed at him. But as quickly as the respite came, shadows flickered at the edges of the light. "Flee, my sweet child." Sarah had been resilient, but now the pull of those shadows crept into her thoughts. "Don't listen to them," he shouted, his voice raw as he embraced her tightly, urgency thrumming through him. "Stay close. We have to trust each other." They navigated the corridor, each step reverberating with an unholy resonance that warned of darkness hungry for them. Yet within him, a flicker ignited a possibility, a plan. In that moment, he remembered the old tales. "Sarah," he started, battling against the rising tide of panic threatening to swallow them both. "Remember what I told you about fear? Sometimes, we have to face the darkness together. But they're so scary, Daddy. What if He paused long enough to look into her eyes, forcing a wobbly grin as comfort. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's about running into the storm, together." Her eyes widened, a glimmer reflecting the light that flickered above. "Together," she echoed, gripping his hand tighter. With a sudden surge of defiance, Mark faced the dark corridor ahead. "We're not afraid of you," he bellowed into the growing expanse of shadows, projecting every ounce of his will. You don't own us. We are free. The laughter faltered, briefly hushed as something shifted in the shadowed space. He could feel the walls tremble, the shadows pulling back like a tide that had met solid ground. But Mark couldn't falter. He pressed on. We want to go home. Home? A now familiar mocking voice echoed from the shadows. But this is home. You belong with us, dear ones. No! Mark shouted, determination flooding him anew. We are not staying. We broke free, and you have no power. The darkness trembled, that primal fear he felt rippling through him now transforming into strength. Gripping Sarah's hand with renewed fervor, he led her forward, the pull of the shadows growing desperate now as they clawed at his heels, each whisper twisting and contorting into anguished cries. But they held tight together, racing towards a horizon that promised light and freedom. As the darkness shrieked, shadows lashed out like desperate tendrils, snatching at their bodies. Mark spun, shielding Sarah against the icy grip of despair closing in on them, voice amplifying with the ferocity that ignited within his core. We're leaving. Not this time. With each frantic step they pressed through, the wall of light illuminating their path wider than ever, beckoning them home. The laughter echoed one final time, hollow and disembodied, the shadows faltering behind them. You can't, you will return you, but they surged forward, crossing the threshold, the warmth of light sealing their escape with an enveloping embrace. Everything around them brightened, the darkness retreating, shrinking until it became a faint memory, an echo that lingered but could no longer touch them. Daddy? Sarah's voice was small, but it filled with newfound hope that swelled like sunshine in the deep dawn. Yes, sweetheart? He replied, breathless and equally weary from the weight of their journey. Did we really make it? Her eyes searched his, seeking reassurance. He knelt down, cupping her small face in his hands, feeling the warmth radiate through her. Yes, my little star. We made it. He could already feel the gentle tug of normalcy wrapping around them once more, the familiar sounds of Maplewood stretching out ahead. Let us go home. As they walked towards the sun-soaked horizon, an echo caught on the wind lingered, whispering at the back of his mind remnant shadows swirling before fading into the backdrop of their newfound freedom. And with each step, they left the memories behind, a lesson buried deep within. Daddy, Sarah said, tugging at his hand. What if they try to get us again? Mark smiled softly, heart lifting for the first time in what felt like an eternity, stepping onto the bright path ahead. Then we'll face it together, just like we always do. And with that, they ventured back into a world of light, hand in hand, ready to embrace tomorrow. Now that our thrilling story concludes, make sure you don't miss out on more of our exclusive tales. You need to subscribe now to the channel so you stay updated with our next stories. Smash that like button now to fuel the algorithm, showing your support for more chilling content. Flood the comments section with your thoughts and theories about this wild ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion too. Let us keep this journey alive together, and remember, never let fear hold you back.